What comes to mind when I say movies? You might think about the latest Star Wars episode, superhero story, or fantasy tale, but the truth is, many people look at Hollywood for their movies. The general movie-going audience gets many of their cinematic experiences from the content coming out of Hollywood. But many people miss out on the unique stories from the independent market. Of the top-grossing movies in theaters right now, only 7 or so are considered independent films. Audiences often believe Hollywood is one of the only places that can produce films in America, but film, and especially indie film, thrives all across the U.S. Utah especially has one of the largest filmmaking communities compared to any other state in America.
Obviously, Utah's landscape for Hollywood for many decades was a natural foil for, or a natural setting for many of the great films that have been shot. Not just Westerns, but other films, including science fiction, as well as even some epic films.
Over the years, Utah has grown as a center for film in the West with many local film resources like festivals, organizations, and more.
For example, Sundance, that will be coming up in January of 2018, there are at least 17 films of the 110 that are listed that will be premiered, but that will also have had some sort of significant Utah connection. Tumbleweeds, for example, is a kids' film festival. That's the only full-fledged Intermountain film festival for kids in the Intermountain West. That's sponsored by Utah Film Center. They have the Dandy's Heels every summer, which is probably the longest-running LGBTQ film festival. You also have, obviously, Spy Hop with its various programs, its real stories, its Pitchnik film. Just in those few programs I listed, it's possible to see scores of film at either no cost or low cost.
Sundance is one of the most well-known film festivals in the world and now has become a great platform for launching indie films to success. Filmmakers from all around the world, as well as locals from here in Utah, find their success at Sundance.
Look at this whole thing. Why did, what's his name, who created Sundance, decide to be here? Because it's everything. You got all of these choices that you can make in an environment that is conducive to attracting people to the business and developing the business.
It is important to try out new things while enjoying the things that we know we like. Hollywood has been putting out more and more original pieces compared to rehashing the same old things. The independent film scene and Hollywood have equally great films. With independent film, there's a sense of creating a great story with what you have, and Hollywood puts out great stories and experiments with the latest innovations in film.
And you just have to keep your mind open because there are a lot of very good commercial releases that are being put out there, and independent films are also available. We're lucky in Utah because, for example, in Salt Lake City, we do have several independent or theaters that are specifically dedicated to independent films, or those that will potentially have a much smaller draw in terms of box office or audiences.
Utah is a growing spot for filmmakers and documentarians, and it really shows how talent is overcoming the film industry. Independent film is important to support because it allows new filmmakers to thrive in a community dominated by Hollywood. Film is an art form that is led by some of the most creative artists of our time. Hopefully, more of you will have an incentive to go out and look for these stories. Maybe, just maybe, one of them will change your life.
Documentaries have become extremely important. The short film format has been one that's become extremely popular as well. Also, many Utah filmmakers, just by virtue of the connection to Sundance, which has been a cinematic institution for now almost 4 decades, of course with the festival, but it has really drawn further attention to what are the possibilities with regard to Utah filmmaking. You also have great film schools in terms of what the University of Utah has done in terms of film studies. Brigham Young University, in terms of its Center for Animation Production, has been a phenomenal resource for the growth in animation film and CGI technology that's being used in cinema. So especially in the last 3 or 4 decades, Utah's presence or connection to the art of filmmaking as well as to the commercial aspect of filmmaking has become increasingly important. Especially in Salt Lake City, we're fortunate to have 2 major independent film organizations, the Utah Film Center, as well as Salt Lake Film Society. Those 2 alone, it's very easy that between those 2 organizations in any given year, you can actually go to see free public screenings of as many as 60, 70, or 100 films if you wanted to. If they offer far more than that. Clearly, blockbusters are a very interesting phenomenon because for about the last 4 decades, they have been a primary focus in terms of the business end of Hollywood. But independent filmmaking is still very much, or films that are not destined necessarily to become blockbusters, but may become blockbusters as a result of just the way they sort of connect to stories. I think of most recently the example of the Pixar release of Coco, which has really sort of far exceeded anyone's initial expectations about how strong of a box office attraction it would be. The film itself is not your typical type of commercial production. And you just have to keep your mind open because there are a lot of very good commercial releases that are being put out there, and independent films are also available. We're lucky in Utah because, for example, in Salt Lake City, we do have several independent or theaters that are specifically dedicated to independent films, or those that will potentially have a much smaller draw in terms of box office or audiences. I like the fact that they're always looking for really interesting stories, and the focus is on storytelling, especially in terms of documentaries. We've seen a particular emphasis here in Utah for documentary filmmakers who have become very, very good at sort of not just taking an issue and then trying to make it to a story. Part of it, I think, is maybe because many of the Utah filmmakers at one point or another, actually they have Utah roots. And so the Utah roots very much emphasize there's that pioneer spirit, there's that sort of enterprising or entrepreneurial spirit. It's been rather exciting to see premieres in Utah of those stories being told. It's been very exciting I've been here 17 years in Utah now, and I've noticed progressively from year to year that more films that are either made by Utah filmmakers or